Hello and welcome to A Gentleman Talks, our series of one-to-one interviews with ladies and gentlemen about their life, their experiences and their influences, all bound up in the framework of our mission to make the world a more respectful, stylish and gentlemanly place. And I'm Zach Falconer-Barfield, and joining me today is the lovely Lydia. Hello, lovely Lydia.
Hello, lovely Zach. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How's everything good today?
Very good. Busy day.
Excellent.
Busy day, and even though August is historically quiet, it's been great for me. So
that's good.
Yeah, fantastic.
So for our audience out there, tell a bit about your name and who you are and what you do currently.
Absolutely. My name is Lydia Foulkes. I have a business called Perfectly Attired, which is essentially bespoke clothing, but it works across ladies and gentlemen, and it's just such a great way to go about life. You know, I have wonderful clients that are from all walks of life. I meet extraordinary people, Zach. I mean, we met. Exactly. I meet extraordinary people, generally by referral, because people kind of like what I do and they let me pass me on. I have a business partner here and a New York office, which is run by my business partner, Lisa, who I've known for about 20 years. So we have, she's a blonde version of me, if you can imagine that, in New York. Yeah, there are. And together we kind of ventured out, we got brave, and we decided we should just do our own thing. And with the experience we both had and the friendship, it's just been a great recipe.
Well, I love what you do, and we're great partners and great friends of yours at The Perfect Gentleman. But this is more about you.
Right.
So to paraphrase Mary Poppins, I like to start from the very, very beginning because it's a very good place to start. So, Lydia, where were you born and raised?
Under a toadstool. No. Norfolk, actually, Norfolk. My childhood was very happy, spent a lovely time growing up in Norfolk.
Whereabouts in Norfolk?
I was born in a place called Needham, in the old fishmongers, which was the most extraordinary house. And at some point in my life, Zach, I'll buy it back. It was, my sister and I were both born there. And it had ghosts, definitely had ghosts, as do so many of the houses in Norfolk. But my memories of fishmongers are when I was a child hearing chains rattle. I mean, I know it's kind of out there, but cool. We used to have the ghost police in, checking out the noises, and yeah, I mean, same with the Skull Inn, another very historical building in Norfolk. It was just a fantastic house, and had a rose garden that my father built me, or made me, which when we sold the house was, such a pain to leave, It was just like, I can't take the rose garden. I think I was 11, I had my heart broken first at the age of 11, and we couldn't take by the rose garden.
Okay.
But we moved, my parents took on a kind of money pit of a house when they decided to sell fishmongers and bought somewhere called The Grange, which was a beautiful house, but it needed total renovation. So I think for about 5 years we lived in a building site, But my mum was an extremely good golfer. She played at Thetford Golf Club, so I had golfing lessons as a child, and I rode horses. Cross country was my thing.
Oh, really?
Very much so, yeah. Well, I lived right next to the forest, And the thing is, we'd go off for hours, like, nobody knew where we were, no compass, no, navigation, no nothing. We'd be gone for hours and get back. As long as we were out before dark, we were fine. You just wouldn't let your kids do that now.
Well,
I don't know.
It should be allowed.
I know, but you just wouldn't, would you?
No.
It's just kind of, you just wouldn't be going off but we used to go riding for hours and hours and hours, me and a friend of mine. It was wonderful. So yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate that it wasn't my horse, it was my, the closest house next door happened to be owned by a judge who was incredibly busy and had a family. So I got to event Ladbroke Lad, which was really very lovely without having, having all the trimmings, but without having all the mucking out. But yeah, so that was a really wonderful time. And then I think about the age of 14 and a half, 15, I think I may have discovered boys. And the horse kind of, the horses, that can happen.
Went away.
Yeah, I think that's what happens. I think you kind of, you either decide to sort of stay with your hobbies or you just start growing up. And, I was involved with the young farmers. My dad was big into the rugby. He was a cricket umpire. So there was an awful lot of sport in my world.
Right.
And I left school, had a pretty miserable 5th year, actually, if I'm honest. Our schools had amalgamated, and it was a bit like target practice at Disc Grammar. We had an extremely good school. There was about 400 kids at the school. And in their wisdom, as they make these decisions, whoever they are, but the government decided to amalgamate and make high schools. Do you remember that? Biggest cock up of the century. Because they will go effectively go back to secondary schools and grammar schools. So basically there was 2,000 secondary school kids and 400 grammar school kids, and they decided not to amalgamate the uniforms. So it was a bit like target practice because we were walking around in blue uniforms versus green ones. So yeah, it wasn't an easy 5th year, and I decided kind of, you know what, I'm a bit done with education. Moved up to Norwich and was working, holding down about 6-7 jobs, saved up a truckload of money, and went off and did a really great expedition at the age of about 17, 18 to Indonesia. So I didn't actually go to university.
Yeah, you went to the University of Life.
I went to the University of Life, Zach, and I tell you, it was just one of the best things I would recommend anybody to do at that age, particularly because you're travelling, apart from anything else, the other side of the world. But we did. It's Operation Raleigh was the original project.
And my God, yeah, I remember. It's kind of doesn't. I haven't remembered seeing it for a while, but it used to.
Right, and I don't even know if it still goes. But John Swales was one of the key people within that structure, and really super guy. And he decided to kind of do a break off and came up with Swale Treks. See what he did there? Swale Trek. And he took kind of this group of youngsters off, and I mean he must be certifiably mad because we're only about 18, and he's taking total charge of sort of 30 kids.
And again, you'd
or
never
30
be allowed
youngsters.
that now, would you?
Well, I mean,
health and safety.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to have had probably 15 trekkers to for the numbers, but we were so fortunate. We had a guy called Tay, and then Lodi. Lodi's father owned Garuda Airlines, so we were in extremely good company with Indonesia. We kind of got ushered in and had one night of luxury when we arrived in Jakarta, and then after that it was just like, right, rucksacks, I mean everything that foot rot, you name it. It was 8 weeks in the jungle with parangs, and it was a fantastic experience. But during the time we went to one of the smaller islands and we did some community work, which was really good. It's the stuff that you should be doing when you're young, which is stuff you should do anyway, but it was an extraordinary trip. And I met I've still got some of my, some of those guys I'm still in touch with now, which is kind of cool.
That's
kind of cool. But I think I lost about 2.5 stone. So if anybody's thinking about doing, weight loss, jungle Indonesia, trekking. Brilliant.
Excellent. That's a new you should write a book about.
Or just send them into the jungle.
It's the jungle weight loss diet. It'll take you 8 weeks.
Absolutely.
You'll be 2 stone lighter.
No word of alarm. It was just, we all got pretty ill, but that's all part of the journey. When you get ill, you get better. And climbing Rinjani and Benaya, which are 2 of the most spectacular mountains, getting to the top and feeling like you're on top of the world. I mean, those memories are like yesterday, and they give you such confidence. I mean, the fact that my parents supported the trip, I had to raise sponsorship, which, going out and kind of doing different events, different things. So it kind of got me out there a little bit. And when I came back, bearing in mind I'd had a really miserable 5th year at school, and I've got a lot of sport in my background, and I get back thinking, what on earth am I going to do for a job? What am I going to do? And all my friends were leaving university and one thing and another. I'm like, I don't really know which path to follow. Well, my mother worked for White and Mcphee as a sales rep. Yeah, whiskey. My sister worked for Virgin Records. She basically she was one of the really early team with Richard. And so there was an awful lot of sales in my family. And I opened the EDP one day, I think it was, and saw an advert for Courage Brewery and thought, cha-ching! What a great way to start. So at the ripe old age of, I think, about 19, I think my first salary was £11,000 and a company Fiesta, and I just thought I'd made it. Yeah. It's just fantastic. But I used to drive around, and at one point when they launched Miller Lite, I mean, this is an absolute, it was just one of the funniest things. I didn't really go to too many of the seminars and kind of, about Miller Lite, and thought, well, it's a light, it's an alcoholic-free beer. So I go product placement. I'm putting this stuff in the low alcohol department. Of course, it wasn't. I sold truckloads of Miller Lite and truckloads of directors. I did extremely well with Courage, and I mean, during the interview, when I met my to-be then boss, Ken Nicol, we started going through the CV and said, he said, what have you been doing? I said, well, just come back from this trip to Indonesia. And he's like, didn't want to talk about school, just wanted to talk all about what I've been doing in Indonesia, just wanted to hear all about it. And he was like, you've stood here and you've presented, you're not going to have any issues with presenting to clients, And I didn't really understand maybe the whole sales process, but I knew that I could go in and talk to people and work out what they may need, may not need, and be able to kind of sell
give them some alcohol.
Absolutely, but there's a lot of mileage up in Norfolk. You drive a long way,
an
awful long way to get to accounts. It can be a little bit soul destroying sometimes. But so then they increased my area. I then got Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, kind of over to Lincolnshire, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was it was a fantastic time in my life, because every time we had a party at the weekend, and I hope Ken Nick will never sees this, but every time we had a lot of parties at the Grange, and my parents were very into hat parties. They used to throw hat parties, and if we were having a party at the weekend, it was like just damage one of the cans in a whole. It sounds so bad, doesn't it? Damage a can, then you'd be able to write off the whole the whole tray.
And then use your mum working for White Mcphee. So it's basically beer and whiskey is the parties at the weekend.
And so there were some great parties. But yes, I mean, it was a fantastic time at Courage.
I want to stop you for a second. So who were influencing you in this period of time? Who was your biggest influences?
My mother.
Your mum?
Mother, yeah, for sure.
What was it about her that was the biggest influence?
She just always believed in me. She just, there was never a doubt. She stood by anything. I mean, I went to school one day with blue hair. She gets a call from the headmistress. She comes to school. She said, "Well, I think it's rather nice. It matches the uniform. She's very colour coordinated. She's expressing herself." There was never a time that Hazel, she knew I'd grow out of that stuff. I think as children, if you allow them to explore within, safe place, yeah, absolutely, then you get bored of doing it, Zach. You're like, oh, that didn't work, so you move on to the next thing. But my dad and I mean, it's very difficult because my father and I are extremely close. I mean, I adore my father. My mum died 10 years ago. So, we were really cut short. She died when she was 64 from motor neurone, which is a shocker.
Sorry.
It was, really tough. But, right from, Mum was a real hands-on mum. We'd spend time over at Southwold, Warbleswick, my childhood was, she drove a red Scimitar and had an 8-track stereo. She was so cool. She worked, she was lady captain at the golf club. She just, and she was so beautiful. I mean, crikey, she was, if you think of Rita Hayworth, there's a clip of Rita Hayworth dancing with Fred Astaire, and I tell you, it could be Hazel. It could so be Hazel, it's bonkers. But yes, and she worked in television when she was younger. I've got a wonderful photograph of her with Eamon Andrews, and he's just like this, looking at her, doughy-eyed. But she had that effect on most guys. I mean, she was just
a lucky man.
But she was, I tell you what, she was just never, she never judged you. All my friends treated her as a mum, surrogate mum in the village. Our house was the cool house.
Oh, that's cool.
It was, we were really lucky. Really.
Do you have
lucky.
an older sister?
I do. Yeah, I have a big sister.
Any other siblings, or is that?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know. Not currently. That's always my answer. Not currently, not that I know of. Yeah.
No. Kathy's in LA. She, after her time at Virgin, she was incredibly successful. She's a bright girl, and was basically asked to go to LA. They were closing down the facility in London. Tough gig. Would you like to come to LA? And I don't think they even had to finish the sentence, and their bags were packed. So, and she's been out there for 15 years. Actually, she's an American now. Does
she sound American?
No, she doesn't. No, she's so English. But there's traits. There's times where we have a conversation, and she lost her dog, and she lost her cat rather, and cats go wandering, right? And you lose cats. It's very sad. But she had a pet detective looking for it. That's LA, right? And she's telling me this, and I'm like, oh, Kathy, I do love you, but what is going on?
Affected by the Californian.
Totally, but in a nice way. She's very successful. She works for as a sound lab, and they have a lot of time. Most of the time there's just there's Uber stars in the studio, and it's kind of it's very much a day-to-day thing for her. But she's worked hard. They work really hard in the States.
They do.
They don't take a lot of holiday. Yeah, and I think
there's a lot more pressure.
There's a lot more pressure, particularly in the film industry, because it's so niche and it's so competitive. Everybody wants to be an actor, everybody wants to be successful, everybody wants to be somebody, and it is a little bit vacuous, LA. I personally don't like LA.
It's not one of my favourites.
It's not one of mine. I'm not out of Washington, kind of New York, Austin, but because my sister's there, I do kind of find myself kind of hopping through on my way to see Dad, who is out in Mexico now.
We'll talk about that later, because I bet you I had the great pleasure of meeting your dad a few weeks ago, and he was a charming gentleman.
He really is.
But let's go back a bit. So you were working at Courage.
Yeah.
And then you kind of what was next? What was next on the Lydia career path?
Well, I was very lucky. Ken, my boss, because obviously having not gone to university, normally Coca-Cola would never have taken anybody on that doesn't have have been to university. That's part of the milk race. But Watney Mann took over Courage, which was such a shame, and the whole entity that was kind of started changing. And then you look now at all the brewers; they're all just going to become one. It's a bit like the banks; they'll just become one faceless kind of institute. And at that time, Ken just said, "Want to jump ship?" I was like, "Where are you going?" He said, "The world of bubbles." And I said, "Oh, righto," thinking champagne, hoping champagne. Ended up at Coca-Cola, which actually was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It's great, in terms of when you work in a really big organisation, you learn a huge amount. And I was very good at sales, and I was sort of quickly moved into the London area, so I was kind of looking after some seriously big accounts, and it was great. And that was how I moved to London. I moved to Courage, and he said, "Look, I've got a job going in London. I think you'd be great." And I'm like, "Okay, give it a go. Big place, top of the M11, loads of lights, can't miss it.
Yeah.
We'll see how we get on." And that was, I moved to London with that job, and it's fantastic. Sort of trying to find my way around London. Nobody had phones, of course. It's good old sort of working out A to Z. Finding cash and carries and all sorts. But I had a tremendously successful time at Coke. And it was probably to my detriment because I was really good in the field sales. And when I wanted to kind of move, into a slightly more maybe marketing type role, that always interested me. Kept getting blocked because I was like, the top performer salesperson in London. And they were like, "You can't move."
Not losing you. Yeah.
So I had about 4 years with Coke, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Great for the CV because it's very much that fast-moving consumer goods. You have Coca-Cola on you, you can go to pretty much P&G, anybody, you can go anywhere. But I was a bit disenchanted with fast-moving consumer goods. I think it was all a little bit. I was doing a lot of business mileage, an awful lot of business mileage, and travelling around the area was getting bigger, and kind of charging around. And I took a bit of time out after Coca-Cola. When I left Coca-Cola, I left on good terms, but I just was getting really frustrated with not being able to kind of move through as one would hope, because I didn't have a degree. And it was suddenly, the reason that I was so excited when I joined the gig, I wouldn't normally have an opportunity like this, and then realising actually it was a fundamental thing that was holding me back.
You're gonna,
you get
the corporate world's going to stop you.
You get blocked, yeah. But you know what? That's okay, because I don't think if I was still working for Coca-Cola, I don't think I'd have had half as much fun.
Right.
It would be really limited because all the decisions are made in Atlanta about a billion years beforehand. You don't really get to influence anything like you do with your own business. That doesn't. There's no, and you're not brave. You're hiding under a kind of a big company umbrella. And
a lot of the people we've spoken to over the course of these talks was very interesting. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who've come out of corporate life into entrepreneurialism. A lot of people who've a couple of people who've sort of gone back into corporate life after entrepreneur. But a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of the guys that ladies and gentlemen we've spoken to are entrepreneurs. I find that very fascinating. Because it's an interesting thing for me as an entrepreneur myself. But it's interesting that what is the biggest difference for you between that sort of corporate time that you spent, and I know you work for another company as well, and sort of your own business, and what's your biggest sort of like, wow, this is my biggest learning, my biggest sort of take home from that?
Well, it's probably two actually. Buck stops with you, ultimately, and you get to you're the one that makes the decisions. If something's not working, you can change it. Whereas so often with some of these larger organisations, they'll just keep going because that's the process, because that's what they do, rather than actually saying that's not working, let's do something else. They're not very reactive, and I think they probably. I probably played small while I was within corporate. I worked with a company called Tom James after that, which was how I kind of came into sort of clothing and tailoring. Very different, very, very different mindset. American-based business, similar in terms of the fact that Coca-Cola are an American-based business, but it was very much more about people, whereas Coca-Cola is all about product. you know. And it's not a very nice product. I mean, they had the Schweppes range, which I really used to enjoy, you know, selling, because that kind of takes you into kind of more interesting people. But, you know, fizzy liquids, I never really drank it. It wasn't, you know, and then they started bringing out things like cherry Coke and then all these other derivatives, and it's like, stop it. Stop it! How far can you milk this? But they do, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. You know, it's a beast of a product, and you know, the world over it's loved. But I guess, you know, the fundamental thing was, if I wanted to do something, it always had to be okayed, or it'd have to be checked with the grand plan if it wasn't part of the grand plan. So I really had no influence whatsoever, really. You know.
So it's about influence and controlling your own destiny.
I think it was about taking an opportunity and thinking, you know, there's always going to be jobs. Yeah. I interviewed for 2 or 3 jobs, and there's some great jobs. And it was ironic that as soon as I started the business, where I got to with starting the business with Lisa, I came back from the States, and it was like, right, we've kind of got a plan now. As soon as I'd made the company limited, done all of that, I got offered 2 killer jobs. And I was like, if you called me 6 months ago, absolutely, but I've already started down this branding process, kind of getting my head around how this would, if we're going to create something, how would it be? And I've already started living it, and actually I'm not quite ready to just go, I'll jump. You know, I figured, you know, I don't consider myself old. I figured I can, if this doesn't go the way I want in, you know, X amount of time, then I go get a job. What's the worst that can happen? If I don't do it, if I don't try it, I know me, I will be kicking myself around the car park saying, why didn't you at least give it a go? You just don't know whether you could have done something, you know, really influential, really exciting, really successful. You just don't know. So, yeah, I think that's probably the fundamental difference, just being brave and giving something a chance to sort of, you know, start.
So how did you get into tailoring?
Well, I mean, I'd been doing, I think, I could glamorise this, but, you know, the reality was I had about 9 points on my driving licence, and it was like, this is getting slightly worrying, because, you know, you lose your licence at 12. And because I was doing so many business miles, it was just like, I've got to think about getting a job. I didn't want to lose my driving licence. When you grow up in Norfolk, you realise how important it is to have a car. You know, otherwise you can't, you know,
there's nothing to do.
You know. And so I figured that I would take at least a year off and just work in London, do something else in a different arena. And I met Paul and Rick, who basically were the guys I ended up working with. And I just loved this. It was new, it was exciting, it was clothes. I mean, it was working with guys, which seemed pretty simple. You know, there was nothing that I couldn't do. So they sent me off to Atlanta to get trained. And I mean, it is a Southern Baptist company, and it is like working for a cult. Now I can say that looking back, but you know, when you're young and you're in a team of people and you're starting on something, and you know, you're empire building, it was very intoxicating, because the training was fantastic, the product knowledge was excellent, and I was in America. You know, they were like, well, why don't you work in New York for a while, see how it goes? So Lisa and I, so we had an absolute riot, and the main account that we worked at the time was Lehman's. So obviously, you know, with both Cazenove and with Lehman's, with the Trade Centre. I mean, Lisa should have been, she was scheduled to be in the World Trade Centre the morning of that atrocity. So, you know, and it just doesn't bear thinking about. But we built our business around Lehman's, basically. So when I came back and brought the business back to London, we just worked referrals constantly, because we knew so many guys in Lehman's, and I ended up working, you know, with people like Peter Sherratt, you know, the top guys at Lehman's here, who were based in Broadgate many, many years ago, and Jeremy Irons, who was the youngest CEO within the city, working with some of the nicest men I've ever met, and I'm still in touch with now. They're still clients now, you know. So it's just, I feel very lucky to have had that time. But America was just such an eye-opener, because New York was just so exciting and vibrant, absolutely, and we were doing something at that point. I mean, this is going back
years.
We were doing something no one else was doing. We were going to offices and talking to people about their clothes. You know, we were going to talk to people individually about their clothes. We weren't shops, so it was a completely different concept. But it was so smart, because these guys were so busy, and you know, we'd be referred, and Lisa and I would just kind of, you know, oh, Bill said I should call you. He said you were really scruffy. Yeah, I am. Come in, see me, you know. I mean, and so there was this lovely kind of dynamism between New York, and we just worked it so brilliantly. And we became great friends, and we are still great friends. You know, it's one of those relationships that if you're going to go into business with somebody, you need to go into business with somebody you trust and that you like. You know, because both those elements are going to be tested at different points. So, you know, if they come from a genuine place, then if you don't trust somebody, there's no point, you know, doing any more for them, which, you know, there's just no point.
True. Warren Buffett once said about people he invests in or work with, he said you've got to like, trust and admire them. And I think that's very true.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. And he, you know, man's a genius, you know.
Exactly. So we worked. So this is how we got into tailoring. So
I was really lucky, you know. And I basically, when I came back to London and with just like a sort of a whole page of guys to get in touch with, and it was just fantastic. And you may remember this. It was quite funny. There was one. I'd been back some time, and the business was going tremendously well, and I started recruiting. Because the thing with that company, they very much liked you to build teams. You know, it was very much about building teams and building empires and doing all this stuff, which is so American, and so fantastic in its way, because you become, you know, you start stepping up into a kind of, you know, I hate to say it, pyramid. But yeah, and so then there was this time when the city decided to dress down. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I think it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I mean, I got called into Jeremy Isaac's office. And Peter Sherratt and Tony Durrant were standing there saying, "I've got a problem." I'm like, "What? You know, what's happened? You know, got a really big problem. Look." They showed me some pictures of guys coming through the door in khakis, and I'm like, "What are they wearing?" I'm like, no one knows what to do if you take them out of a suit. I said, "Of course they do. They wear trousers and a really great jacket. What's not to know?" Yes, but they don't know. They don't know, and we haven't given them any kind of directive. I said, "Well, you really need to." So then basically I got endorsed. I spent most of my time on the 7th floor in the executive dining suites in the top level of Lehman's with a sort of, you know, train of guys coming up to be measured to just be like, "Okay, I need to get proper kitted out." I'm like, well, yeah, if you're going to be working in the city in a corporate environment, you've got to at least wear a pair of trousers, not jeans or combats.
But then, having seen some of the men, and you and I both know this, walk through the city of London, and you just look at them, and even the trousers are appalling. I mean, some it's very. I was taking some public transport the other day. I was in the bus, and I was looking at went through the city and into Oxford Street, and I was counting. It was summer's day, and I was counting, sort of just mentally counting all the well-dressed ladies and gentlemen. You know, they were stylishly dressed. I counted 40 ladies who I would go were very stylish, very elegant, catwalk level, 4 guys.
Wow.
And you just think, come on, guys.
I think an idea for a show would be that you'd have that van and you'd screech up and you'd open the door and you'd drag him in and then you go, "Right, we're going to do a makeover." And you're not leaving until you're perfectly attired. So,
nice brand. Like that.
But, you know, I mean, I have to really restrain myself, and so more often than not I just go up and say, "Hey, you know what, if you're ever in the market for clothes."
Yeah.
And it's not offensive, but, you know, I think people
There's
are...
a girl doing it, no, it's not.
No, and I think that's, you know, again, because there is something quite nice about being able to say to guys, "Well, look, this is, if we were going out together, this is a wardrobe I'd like to see you wear," or, you know, "These are the colours I think," you know, and particularly as men get older and more experienced in life, they still hang on to those fantastic suits they bought in Gives or wherever 15 years ago, but ultimately the suit's great and it will probably outlast all of us. But it dates them terribly and the colours date them. So I do quite a lot of work with placement companies where somebody's just secured a great new job, you know, maybe come back to the workplace after, say, 3 years, having had, you know, where they've had these clauses where they've got to stay out of business for, you know, financial markets for X amount of time because, you know, they're too valuable to the business. And then it's like, right, we need to really start from scratch. And it's quite lovely because most chaps I work with are just like, "You know what, let's just do that. Let's just build a wardrobe. Let's just build a really great wardrobe." And then their wives get involved, which is fantastic because I nearly always end up making them something gorgeous like a jacket. You know, every girl should have a navy blazer. Every girl should have, you know, a fabulous dress. And that's what started to happen over here. We've started to make beautiful evening wear, great dresses, some corporate wear. We've just finished a project with Reading Football Club for the hospitality team. You know, it's just started to take a bit of a life of its own on, and I think that's what's so lovely when you say, what's your business? Well, actually, I don't know yet. I don't know, because I'm allowed to just kind of say, well, if we think we can look after this and we can do a great job for that, then we'll take it on.
Yeah.
I suppose the one thing I have learned in the last 2 years is always be very strict about your procedures. If you've got a way of doing things, stick to it. Don't be kind of managed by the client or run by the client, because that can,
especially in that sort of area. Yeah.
But you know what? When you're when you start a business, you want everything to work. You want it all to be, you know, and you have to realise your limitations and say, you know what, no, because that's not the way I do things. So I've got a lot better at saying no. I help everybody, I'll do stuff for everybody, but I'm actually getting better at, you know, when something comes in, like, you know what, no, that's not, we won't do that, we'll do it like this. And if you don't like it, you know what, go see my competitor, waste their time. Because and I'm feeling a lot more confident now, because I know that if I did that, it would be a time vampire. And, you know, time's the only commodity we have. I mean, you know, I've got some incredibly wealthy clients, I won't name them, but a couple of them are really, a couple of them are really miserable. They've got loads of money, they're really miserable. I mean, you know.
Yeah. Happiness is a state of mind.
It is,
not
completely.
the amount of money in your bank account.
Well, but so I think we live in an environment now or a society now where we're conditioned to think that you will be happy if you're a size 10 and if you are rich,
yes,
or if you are a celebrity.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just such nonsense. It's such nonsense.
Yeah.
The whole culture that's become, you know, we've almost sort of accepted that, you know, people that just do nothing and can't spell are actually okay to be celebrities. What?
Yes.
You know, I don't understand how we got to here.
No, I don't personally either, and I think you're right. It's kind of one of those. It's a weird thing. I've talked about this with a number of people. I kind of get very frustrated with that, and with the sort of that we've become this selfish little bubble culture. You know, it's all about me. What can I get for myself?
And just a complete demise of sort of civility towards people.
Yeah.
Treating each other nicely. You know, just being respectful. There is such a lack of that, you know, and that's why I think when you and I first started talking about the whole concept, you know, I just thought it had such gravitas, because it's exactly, you know, we talk about people who've influenced me. My dad, apart from being an umpire, apart from being, you know, just a top bloke, as you said, loved by all, you know. My parents did divorce, you know, so there was stuff obviously that wasn't great, but you know, it's like I always had an extraordinary relationship with both of them. But you know, Dad, whenever we walk down the street, he walks on the outside of the pavement. Whenever I get up from a table, he stands. You know, he always opens the door for me. He just always does this really small things that make you feel like $1 million as a woman, and they cost nothing. And you know, sometimes when I'm at events, you know, and I'm in the company of extremely, you know, esteemed people, and I think, I could learn something from my dad.
It's very funny. I can't name names either, but we went through. When we do it, we did it this year. And we're going to last year. We're going to do it this year. Our Gentleman of the Year.
Oh yes.
And we did sort of, you know, we do our top. They're not top 10 in one sense, but they're our 10 Gentlemen of the Year. We say. And we had a long list, and we were sort of sitting around the table. There's a few of us and a few well-connected people in the media industry, and we were going through and we're going, oh no, you can't have him, he's not a gentleman. He might look like he's a gentleman, but he's not a gentleman. You can't have him, he's not a gentleman. And it's just surprising. You kind of go, I'm going, oh, I didn't know that about him. Oh, okay. Off the list.
Because it immediately has a bearing on you know, gentlemanly behaviour. It covers, you know, so many aspects. But I think, I mean, I can think of people that I think are gentlemen, but probably, yes, you're right, they're not, because of their conduct.
Yeah, you'd think, oh, he is by the way he dresses, maybe.
Absolutely.
And that style thing, he might be very stylish.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go underneath that, and his actions are not very gentlemanly.
Correct.
And you kind of go, oh, okay. And what I find really amusing is you get, it's so you know, people go, oh my God, he behaved like a gentleman. And you're like going, no, it should be the way he behaves always.
Absolutely.
It should be an extraordinary measure.
Well, you know,
you get counted at.
But something, I think unprovoked acts is something that I've always, you know, Dad does things, always has done. He'll just send me a note, or he'll just, you know, call, or he'll just organise something, and it's not something that I've asked for. It's not, you know, he just does those things. And And I think in terms of an act of generosity, just knowing that he's been thinking about me, especially since he moved to Mexico, years ago. He's been in Mexico for about 15 years, but he started to have the summers back here, so he's getting more involved with his cricket umpiring. And, he lives here for 4 months, for 8 months rather, and he goes back for the winters because he just can't stand the cold. Which I think he's got absolutely the perfect lifestyle.
I can't complain at all on that side. I wouldn't complain at all.
But, he's whenever he comes back, he's just like, he's fine. Everything is such a meltdown for him. He's so frustrated. He's like, this country, this isn't. And I used to kind of go, oh, Dad, come on. It's not. It's this, isn't this? And actually, in the last 2 to 3 years, he's absolutely been on the money every time. He's not deluded, just completely devastated by the way things have, certain things that have happened, and how we've made certain people important, and his big one is football at the moment. Gareth Bale, 85, and he's like, that's I'm like, Dad, it's what it is. He's like, yeah, but somebody's so much more important than the game, and I think, it has all got a little bit kind of bonkers.
Well, I sport-wise, I'm not a sports fanatic, but I am. I have always said I was talking to your dad about it. We were talking about. He was talking about funny that, but I ended up. I was talking to your dad about. We were talking about football and umpiring and refereeing, and because he was saying about one thing he dislikes is now they're talking back to the cricket umpires.
Absolutely,
and he's like,
it's appalling.
It's not good. And I said, yeah, imagine you being a football ref, and he goes, oh. I said, they're bad behaviour. If they really wanted to deal with it, it's very simple. Red card, red card, red card, red card, 8 people off, thank you very much.
No one played.
Suddenly everyone goes, ooh.
Well, I wondered if you introduced the sort of sin bin idea to football, that it would keep the game moving. But it's that. But that whole thing with Daddy is he's very much slightly deluded with certain things. But he loves his cricket, loves his sailing. He's sailing. He comes back, he generally sort of hires a boat for the month of August, and people come out and we just all go and have a bit of a hoot out on the boat. So I'm really looking forward to this trip that we're going to be doing in October, is to Croatia. We've got some time. Yeah. Really just, there's 6 of us on the boat, it's just going to be great. And then he goes back to Mexico. So, the summers always suddenly seem to be flying by now. But he has umpired, as you know, at most of my corporate days, and he's got his own fan club now.
I know.
It's so funny.
And he was very, 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 had an eye for the young ladies as well, I noticed.
He has. He certainly has.
With great charm and aplomb, I have to say.
Don't get me started. It's very endearing, and you know what? He's as I call him now, 74 not out. And, and I hope he's around for another 74,
Yeah, it would be
because
great.
He's just such a legend. And when Mum died, I mean, he was obviously, that rocked his world too,
Yeah, it's a big part of his life.
Absolutely. And, he was very sweet, it's like, come out to Mexico, and I probably should have maybe taken the opportunity to spend a bit more time out in Mexico then, maybe taken a bit of a break, and actually had some time away, but, I was working, and it was kind of get back to work and get back into some routine, but you can never take compassionate leave twice, okay? Note to self, you can never take it twice.
No.
And I think sometimes you don't realise the gravitas of what's actually happened when it's happened. And Mum's illness was huge. It was just shocking. I mean, motor neurone is it's the most dreadful disease. And when I see things in the news about stem cell research, only until you've lost somebody you really love to a disease like that would you say that you shouldn't have this in our lives. It's like we have to do this research. We just have to do this research, because living in a world without Parkinson's and motor neurone would be a world I'd be really happy to live in.
Yeah.
But Dad and I have always been close. But I suppose since Mum died, I've been out to Mexico about 15, 16 times over the last 14, 15 years, and I've got some great friends there. I absolutely love it as a country. I get very defensive when people say, "Oh, it's dangerous." It's like, well, what? So's Peckham. Yeah. I mean, yes, there's areas of danger in Mexico, and if you're dealing drugs, then probably there's a lot more danger. But the reality is that Mexico is beautiful. The people have a very similar sense of humour to the English, and they don't maybe have so much, but their generosity is unbounded. It's a wonderful country. Wonderful country. Very lucky that I've been able to go
And they're taking over America as well. So
hopefully.
Yeah, I was reading, and someone told me the other day that by 2045, Hispanic people
for sure.
The rest of the nations and the rest of the people in America. So
well, Dad told me, I think his dad's motto is never spoil a good story with the truth. Okay, so on that basis, last time I was there, he said, they just tendered the Tijuana border. And I said, have they? He said, yeah, Mexicans won it. I was like, did they? He said, yeah, no, seriously, it's free access, and now to America, it's because when you go into Houston or LA, you go through this debacle of kind of eyes, nose, everything else, which is completely ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous because actually, generally, you can get through the border of Tijuana with not too much hassle. And when he said that they put them in charge, the Mexicans are in charge of the border, I said, well, that'll help. But America would come to a grinding halt.
Yes, it would.
It would. It would absolutely come to a grinding halt.
I want to talk a little bit more about Perfectly Attired before we finish off.
Yes.
How did you come up with the idea?
Okay.
And sort of what inspired you to do it, and sort of where are you now? And what's kind of the next steps for you?
Well, I guess I'd had a consultancy called Perfectly Pitched, and basically I'd had, after my time at Tom James, I moved into doing slightly more kind of corporate jobs for about a decade, so. And there was two things that happened, actually. I mean, I'd worked in a very corporate arena again, selling high-end transport, and it was very much the same kind of clients. Nailed some really big deals with some really large companies like JP Morgan and kind of Citigroup, and 4, 5, 6 million pound accounts, and had all that experience behind me. And I got to a point, golly, it must be 5 years ago, I can't believe that period of time, where basically it was kind of, you either put some money into this or, there's going to be a management buyout. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got money because Hazel left me money. And, you sort of you're never sure what to do with an inheritance. I don't know, you always want to do something. It's either property or something. So I've done bits and pieces, but I still had a big chunk of change. It was like, do you know, if she was here right now, I think she'd say, no, put it on Blackhand, put it on you, And I did. I just decided that there was like what was on offer versus what the potential was. I could go for another job. There were other jobs I could do. I could work with different management teams, but I'd still be playing to their tunes. So I did some consulting, which was really good fun, and realised there was a whole world outside of, a wage slave, which was very enlightening. Went over to the States and I went to see my sister in Los Angeles and went to the studio, and there was just one day, it was like there was a combination of things that happened on that trip. I'd gone to LA and Kathy was like, oh, we need some jackets made, and then suddenly I get this, well, Lydia can do that, and I'm like, what? Yeah, so I'm trucking down into LA to go get some mood boards, tape measure, and thinking, what she's setting me up for? What's she setting me up for? I ended up making some great jackets for some very cool people. So at that point, I was like, yeah, I came back to present some ideas, and the studio were paying for it. And I was like, what do you think? Oh, Liz, you always made such beautiful suits. I don't understand if you're thinking about doing anything, I think you should think about your own business. She said, I would never be brave enough. I'm telling you that right now. But if you need some support or a business mentor, I don't know. So my next journey took me to Hilton Head to go and see my lovely friend Martin Mcphee, who has done extremely well, lost it and made it all back again. So he's one of those guys, the
real entrepreneur, as I call them.
You can really learn from. So we're out in his boat. Lisa comes down from New York. We're out in the boat. And at this point, I've been working with Perfectly Pitched for some time, and we were on the boat, and Martin just says, this whole Perfectly thing, where's it going? And I said, well, I don't know. Why don't you two get back together? And we just kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, she was at Brooks Brothers, miserable as hell, not really getting to where she wanted to be. Literally said, well, it wouldn't be the worst thing we did, would it? I said, Kathy's been on at me like this. And there was just like, those conversations are it's always timing. You've got to be open to the idea of doing something. And we started going through this kind of, perfectly retired, perfectly, all these different dynamics of what we could do in terms of this perfectly umbrella. And then Perfectly Attired just kind of hung in the air. And Martin just came in with, I love that. And Lisa said, I love that. And I said, I love that. God, I really love that. That's so good. And it is. It's just so good. And it's so positive and so happy as a statement, just be perfectly attired. And so then we kind of went back to the drawing board. There is another Lydia in this equation. And when we're together, when we go out, we call ourselves Lydia Squared. Martin's lady is called Lydia. And she is an extremely talented designer. So I don't think we'd even moored up. And Martin had been on the jungle drums, right, we're doing this. This business is happening, Lydia. Get to it. So
you're doing it, don't you?
I mean, and so we suddenly, in that evening, she's kind of starting to draw on some ideas about, how the logo would be and what it's like, oh God, that's really nice. Well, what if we were to do it like this? And she knew what she was doing. She just got us both thinking one step further. So yeah, we kind of came back, did a bit of homework, did a bit of consulting. I was working with another company at that time, and it was just like, other bits and pieces, like, right, we need to let that go because it's stopping us start something. And it was really a question of just starting from scratch, which is kind of scary, because, you think, what do you do here? And I'd retrained. I spent some time with Lisa retraining, hooked up with some guys on Savile Row who actually are the cutters for Anderson Shepherd, and just went right back to school. You like, right back to school, like pretend I never did this, start me off again. And it was probably the best thing I did because I got to meet some really great people who have become partners to the business in terms of my cutters and business associates. I went shopping, which is something I hate doing. I hate shopping.
Really? You hate shopping?
I hate shopping. It's why my business is why, most of my clients hate shopping. They loathe shopping, Zach. They either have neither time or the inclination to shop. And I'm one of them.
See, I love shopping. I really love shopping.
Absolutely, but why? When I can have what I want, when I want, how I want, rather than having a brand tell me what I should have.
Yeah, no.
It's a slightly different dynamic, and so I went shopping. I went everywhere, and I was just like, yeah, okay, there's some interesting things here. Yeah, there's nothing that really stood out, and I thought, it still goes back to actually having your clothes made for you to fit for you.
Yeah.
And that really hasn't really happened. And I think Karen Millen's playing around with it. I think a couple of companies are playing around with it, but it is a personal service, and that's what I love about our business. It's very much one-on-one, and the suits often are the reason that I'm in front of somebody, but they're not what we talk about for 45 minutes. I hear all about everything else. And
so you're almost like the hairdresser closet therapist.
I'm a business speed dater, I tell you that. It's unashamedly. And with what I call my suit club, guys that work with me, if they need some help and they want to meet some people, then I'll introduce them because I just think you've got to keep it going. And there's been some really interesting business deals done on the back of my introductions, which, I think...
Where's my cut?
Well, as long as they keep coming back
to you.
Right. Then I think that it's...
That's your cut.
That's the cut. And they refer me, and that's all I say, I don't want that dynamic to change within our relationship, but I just, open the doors up to 10 guys that that might like what I do. Do you know anybody that wears clothes? Yeah, I do. Great. Well, I should put me in touch with them. Yeah. So it becomes more natural, and I got so much better at asking for help. And I think naturally as a woman, if I said, if I dropped something right now, I'd say, oh no, you do it because you're such a gentleman. But that whole as a woman asking for help, I didn't know how to. And I thought, I'm going to make this my goal. And Lisa and I said to each other, right, every meeting, who do you know in New York? You must know somebody in New York. Yep. And then we started that whole, which is what we did so well at the beginning. And that's just been bonkers. We've got guys reconnecting, and the referral side of the business is great because we have an office in New York and we have an office in London, and most people are doing business between the two. So yeah, I mean, it's been great. And here we are, sort of 3 years in, and I wonder, each year, this year, it's respectable turnover, it's profitable, which is nice. I've had support from my dad, I've had support from my sister in terms of, being mentored. I've learnt more in this period of time than I've learnt in the rest of my working career. Found a lot of things I don't like about myself, and I've, been able to kind of say, well, you don't do that now, do it like this, because that whole thing about pleasing everybody, try and be, it's not great for my, if you're a smaller company. Paul joining the business about 2 years ago has been phenomenal. We get on great. It's like, we're growing, and we're growing, and he retrained. I hope you won't mind me saying, but he's 56, and retraining at any time is not an easy thing to do. He's been a great student. He loves his clothes, very well connected. I wanted somebody that had as good a black book as I did, because otherwise, what's going to happen is we're not going to really move forward. Exactly. So, and Lisa's, started to build her team over there. I can't see that I want to manage 1,000 people, actually. That's, I really like dealing with high net worth individuals and running the events that I run and going to amazing places and having, November, I'm going to the Grand Prix and I'm selling a load of oilmen, you know. I mean, so my whole, I'm working my diary very much around what I like to do in my social calendar. Is that shameless?
Yes, shameless, but very good. We like that.
Well, and I think, you know, it's not a dress rehearsal. You know, Mum's always taught me that. It's like, you know, I would rather remember somebody who's having a lot of fun and, you know.
Oh, yeah. That's very true.
The last thing that, you know, they remember thinking, gosh, you know, well, last time I saw her, she was smiling, you know, rather than bloody hell, she was miserable, she was at the office until 11 o'clock. And I've done that, Zach. I've done it. I've been the last one at the office. It don't get you anywhere.
No, I totally agree with that.
It doesn't get you anywhere.
No, I think that's very true. So, Lydia, we're kind of wrapping up now.
Yeah.
So I could talk to you for another hour quite happily.
For hours and hours.
So we could do it. We'll definitely have to do another one.
Yeah.
But now it's time for our Gentleman Talks. So we end our Gentleman Talk session, as we always do, with our 10 gentleman questions. And so, Lydia, ready?
Yep.
What makes or embodies a gentleman for you?
Probably manners, well-mannered.
What's the most romantic thing you've ever experienced?
I've had poetry written for me, Zach, which was pretty damn good. When somebody's actually taken the time to kind of put pen to paper and make something very beautiful out of words and prose.
Well, it works.
It's a tough one to beat.
If you could bring one gentlemanly trait into business, what would it be?
You probably wouldn't have this issue, but for me it would be to not interrupt. As a woman, men always think that their voice should be heard, and it's a characteristic of many men that I've worked with, that they'll just talk over you. And then it'll be, oh, and what did you think? Like, you care? Yeah, you know, that's something from my experience in corporate and, you know, grown-up jobs, that it can be, it's very rude.
Very rude. Definitely not. What element of grooming is most important for a gentleman?
Oh, my dad's favourite saying is cleanliness is next to godliness.
Name an iconic gentleman.
Okay, so no criteria.
No.
I would suggest, you know, myriad of people come to mind, but actually I was very fortunate to go to Keith Bradshaw's leaving do at Lord's. He was the MCC chairman before Derek Brewer, and he had to go back to Australia. And they threw a bit of a bash for him. John Major, Andrew Strauss, Mervyn King were all on my table. And Braddy and I got to know each other through cricket, and just such a legend, great friend, great mate. And he invited me to this function, and I didn't realise it was what it was. So I, you know, arrived, I think it was about 5 minutes late, and I walked through the door. There's about 400 people, you know, and I'm thinking, I just went, oh my God, there's John Major. And I sat down, went, oh gosh, oh no. And, you know, all the speeches and the dinner and everything goes on, and towards the end of the evening, Mervyn King was walking past, and I just turned around and I said, I have so much respect for you, and I just feel very safe in your hands through this very dark time. This is about 3 years ago. And and I said, but I feel like a bit of a fraud for being here. He said, why? Did you gate crash? I said, no. No, I know Keith, but look at who's here. You're here. You know, look. He said, but you're a friend of Braddy. Of course you should be here. And I just said, you know, Mervyn, you're just such a nice gentleman.
Oh.
And that, for me, will always stay with me, because I just think, you know, Sir Mervyn King, he was a legend.
That's cool.
He just really touched my world.
Oh, that's cool. What would you say? What is this is important for you? What item do you most like to see a gentleman wear?
It's probably two. I really love a well-tailored casual jacket. I just think, you know, you can get away with jeans, dress it up, gives a different dynamic. But I do like a waistcoat.
Like a waistcoat?
I love a waistcoat.
Okay. I still have to start wearing them. I need to lose a bit of weight.
It's okay, touch your toes, 10 times every day.
Why should there be more gentlemen in the world?
Well, I suppose it touches on what we were saying earlier about the sort of demise of civility, how people have stopped being nice to each other, the way they treat people. You know, it's a downward spiral, really, isn't it? And if that doesn't stop, I think etiquette should be taught in school. I think it should be compulsory. You know, you don't leave school until you know how to be nice to people and speak well, and you know, where does it start? Where does it stop? I just think that we've seen this horrible kind of spiral downwards in the way people behave towards each other, and it's nice to be nice.
Yeah, I agree. And this follows on quite nicely. What key skills should every young gentleman be taught?
Probably etiquette, pure etiquette, not just being polite, but those things I was talking to you earlier about with Daddy, walking on the side of the pavement, so if there's a car coming, he takes the raps. You know, holding a door, getting up from the table.
Yeah.
That just make you feel $1 million.
What should a gentleman never be without?
A compliment.
I like that.
And
finally,
a handkerchief. And a handkerchief.
And a handkerchief. and finally, finish this sentence. A gentleman should always...
Be perfectly attired.
Lydia, an absolute pleasure, as always. Thank you so much.
Great
It's
to
been
see
a
you, Zach.
great
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you.
A lot of fun.